Welcome to our class. Reading history books is boring, right? So here we are turning your chapters into movies. Ever wondered how an entire nation rose against its king? Today, we're not just reading history, we're stepping into the story of the French Revolution. Let's get started.
On July 14th, 1789, driven to their absolute breaking point, a furious Parisian mob stormed the Bastille fortress. Once the crowd breached the walls, they systematically dismantled the fortress, carrying away chunks of stone to sell as souvenirs. It is a strange image, a starving, desperate population prioritizing the demolition of an ancient prison. Why attack this specific building? Rewinding the timeline reveals the exact economic and social collapse that built the powder keg. In 1774, King Louis XVI took the throne of a bankrupt nation. France was drowning in over 2 billion livres of debt, drained by decades of war and military support for the American Revolution. Yet, facing this massive deficit, the royal family continued spending heavily to maintain the sheer scale of the royal court at the Palace of Versailles. The state needed revenue. The French old regime operated on a rigid class structure, divided into 3 estates. The first estate, the clergy, and the second estate, the nobility, were legally exempt from paying taxes. This political cartoon from the era shows the reality of that system. The entire financial burden of the country was strapped to the back of the third estate. The remaining 90 people began demanding a society built on merit and a social contract, arguing that privilege should not be granted by birthright, and absolute monarchy had no place in a fair society. This intellectual shift provided the political direction. Combining that new ideological framework with the raw desperation of a starving public created the match for the powder keg. By 1789, the king had run out of options. To legally raise taxes, he was forced to call a meeting of the Estates General, a political body representing all 3 classes. As this data visualization shows, the voting mechanics were heavily skewed. Because each estate was given exactly 1 vote, the clergy and nobility could always combine their votes to overrule the massive third estate. The third estate representatives demanded a proportional 1-man, 1-vote system. King Louis XVI flatly rejected the proposal. The representatives walked out in protest. They occupied an indoor tennis court and swore an oath to draft a constitution limiting the king's power, declaring themselves the National Assembly. Back on the streets of Paris, rumors spread that the king was deploying the military to crush this new assembly. Panic swept through the starving population. The storming of the Bastille happened precisely where the middle class's demand for political power collided with the lower class's fight for physical survival. They targeted the fortress because it physically symbolized the king's absolute power. Facing a nationwide revolt, the king surrendered. In August, the feudal system and aristocratic tax privileges were legally abolished. This document is the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen. It established a new framework for France, asserting that men are born free and equal in rights. The absolute monarchy was dismantled. The 1791 Constitution divided power into 3 branches: the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary. Yet this system had a glaring limitation. Voting rights were restricted exclusively to active citizens, meaning only wealthy men over 25 could participate. True equality remained out of reach. The revolution replaced a system of privilege based on birth with one based on wealth. This new wealth disparity quickly alienated the lower classes, leading to the rise of radicalized citizens who formed the Jacobin clubs. They became known as the sans-culottes. As a direct protest against the upper class, they refused to wear aristocratic knee breeches, choosing instead to wear striped long trousers as a symbol of their working-class solidarity. The political demands born in France didn't stay contained. These ideals of liberty and democratic participation rapidly bled across European borders, and eventually the globe. The French Revolution was a messy, brutal starting point. It tore down an ancient social hierarchy and set the benchmark for the modern fight for democracy, a fight that is constantly being evaluated.
Thank you for watching.